I want to tell you a story about one of the biggest environmental economical, and public health disasters Europe has ever seen. The story about how one tiny nation called Denmark managed to kill 11 million tiny little cute animals in a horribly organized slaughterfest, and then found out they didn't actually have to. This is so fucked, the Danish mink massacre. This is a mink. It's an animal that has the misfortune of having a particularly long, dense and soft fur. When humans found out how nice this fur was, they decided to farm the animals on a massive scale, meaning we now breed them purely to kill them for their skin. This great leap for mankind is commonly referred to as the fur industry, and we in Europe are at the top of it. And you can thank countries like Lithuania, Poland, Finland, Greece and the Netherlands for the majority of that. These 5 top fur-producing countries account for 16.5 million fur skins per year. But that doesn't even come close to my home country, Denmark. Denmark alone produces more than 17 million animal skins per year, making it the biggest fur producer of Europe. And the Danes' furry little friend of choice has long been the mink, with 1,100 farms harboring a total of 14 million minks. Denmark is the #1 mink producer on the planet. Every year, Denmark exports fur for the estimated value of 1.1 billion euros. As you can imagine, breeding animals in tiny cages and killing them for their skin is an animal welfare catastrophe, which is a fancy way of saying deeply and utterly fucked up. But it was just way too profitable to stop. Until our little friend COVID-19 came along. What happens when you pair the biggest pandemic of the century with millions of critters crammed together in massive factory farms? Absolute mayhem. Our story begins on June 17th, when COVID-19 is found at a farm in the area of northern Jutland in Denmark. The virus spread rapidly amongst the minks. Then health authorities announced that a mutated variant of the virus had been found in the minks. Called Cluster 5, it had infected at least 12 people, and experts warned it could make a potential coronavirus vaccine less effective. The Danish government, faced with the prospect that its already unpopular mink industry would sabotage 8 months' worth of vaccination effort, keeping the world in lockdown for even longer and making Denmark look like absolute shitheads for decades to come. So the Danish government panics. They decide that the only right thing to do is mass extermination. They had to kill every single one of the 14 million minks living in the country. Apart from the ethical catastrophe, killing 14 million minks ASAP is a logistical nightmare, especially when it's incredibly badly organized. The military had to step in to assist the government officials and the farmers, who gassed and stored the minks in containers, transported them to facilities where they were turned into biodiesel, and as well put them in incinerators where they were burnt. However, this didn't always go as planned. There is at least one video of a mink surviving the gassing process, and several cases of minks being transported alive to the burning facilities. Another problem, there weren't enough containers to store the dead minks. So some government officials just dumped the minks on the ground, let them rot there for everyone to see and smell. In 2 instances, trucks accidentally spilled thousands of dead minks on the roads of Denmark. And the COVID-infected minks were very much still contagious. And then, when incinerators ran over capacity, it was decided that millions of mink corpses were to be put in these mass graves that the government created. In general, it's fair to say that this whole operation was an absolute horror show, which left everyone from the public to the farmers to animal rights activists angry and disgusted. Newsflash, it was completely unnecessary. Halfway through the slaughter, after killing millions of animals, the government learned that Cluster 5 actually wasn't harder for antibodies to neutralize and therefore didn't pose a threat to vaccine efficacy. The entire mass call was fundamentally pointless. All those animals had been killed for no reason. And then the cull turned out to be illegal. There was absolutely no legal authority for the government to enforce it. This has led to one of the most severe political turmoils in modern Danish history. The Danish Minister of Agriculture has stepped down, the ministry itself has split into two, and the government is in danger of collapsing, with a study suggesting that its popularity has fallen by 20%. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, broke down in tears when she visited the empty farms. And there are serious economic consequences. Denmark has essentially amputated its precious billion-euro mink industry, putting 6,000 jobs at risk. And to express their anger, farmers have protested all over the country. The upshot, closing down Denmark's mink industry could save up to 171,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year and untold amounts of animal suffering. And if you thought the story ended with Denmark, think again. COVID-19 infections have been discovered at mink farms in countries like France, Italy, Spain, Greece, Poland, Sweden, and the Netherlands. France has killed over 1,000 minks after a mutated variant of the virus was discovered at a farm. And Ireland are planning to cull their 120,000 minks. So it looks like COVID-19 managed to do what animal rights activists have tried to do for decades. It's thrown a massive stick in the wheels of Europe's fur industry, which might never fully recover. The interesting and depressing side note to this is Europe's fur industry running out of steam could potentially lead to a mass expansion of fur production in China. It seems like if there's money to be made, someone will always be happy to put animals through hell for it. And the only hope of stopping all this suffering is if one day no one will ever want to buy animal fur anymore. Meanwhile, in Denmark, the nightmare is not over. You remember those mass graves from earlier, right? It turns out dumping millions of animal corpses in shallow trenches is not the ideal way to dispose of them. After a couple of days, this happened. The gases formed inside the decaying mink bodies have made them expand. The result? Hundreds of rotting and possibly still infectious mink corpses being pushed back to the surface. A ghastly reminder of human cruelty, idiocy, and greed.